before you even set foot out the country to teach, what was the thought process before you made the decision?
Honestly, there were a lot of life changes that kind of happened. But I guess I'll start with it was always kind of my thing to be in media. That was so, working at Essence was something that I had wanted to do since college. Before I actually went abroad, I was working at the time, it was under the umbrella of Time Inc. And so I was at Time Inc. at fortune.com in the sales department, and then it kind of morphed into like CNN.com. So the department got kind of shut. In other words, I wasn't working. I didn't have any like steady job. Okay. And it was like a really pivotal moment in my life. And I said, I've never lived in another country and I want to do it. This is something that I want to do. All right. And so um I was always a big fan of going to events. I still do this in New York City, just events, meeting people, etc. At the time, there was something called Moxie in the city. This was quite a long time ago. And they said, if you volunteer, to help out with this session, you'll get free sushi and sake. I loved sushi and sake, and I was like, let me volunteer to, at the front, to sign people in, whatever. And it happened to be like a Japanese teaching Japanese session. Now, when I got to this session to help to volunteer so I could get my sushi and sake, I noticed that there was a white man teaching Japanese. And I was kind of like, what's going on here? So then afterwards, I started talking to him and he told me he had taught in Japan for 3 years. And basically, that's really what started the ball rolling because I definitely wanted to live in a country that was completely foreign, like just the culture it would be like distinctly different, etc. Now, initially, I was thinking about Spanish speaking countries because I minored in Spanish in college. And I was in a very strict program in my high school in terms of only speaking Spanish in class. So Spanish was my jam, I thought, right? But in terms of me making this type of step in my life, I definitely needed hand holding. And the Spanish speaking countries that really didn't exist there. It was more of you had to kind of chart your own course in order to get there, save substantially, too much figuring things out that I didn't, I quite frankly didn't want to do. I needed hand holding, right? So I started doing some research. Actually, I made a spreadsheet and I put all the, different countries I might be interested in going to on the spreadsheet, look them up, right? Like, okay, how could I potentially work there? What would be available? And, in terms of teaching English, because that guy at that session put that in my head, right? Okay, I wanted to go to another country, but how was I going to support myself? Right. So he told me he taught. So I started doing a lot of research on my nerdy spreadsheet and I had all the stuff lined up and I said, okay, I started, making calls and etc. This was way back in 2005. I think, yeah, it was like '05 or so. Okay. And so this is what I did. And then to kind of just narrow things down, I ended up going with this company in Japan called Nova at the time. And basically, Nova offered interviews here in the States for you to see if they would be able to bring you on board. So for me, that was excellent. I actually had missed the New York date by the time I found out about it, so I went to Philly. And I was interviewed there. It was quite a long, I feel like I was there like almost all day for the interview process. And yeah, and so that's kind of how I started out. Now to explain a little bit about Japan in terms of being accepted there, working there. As I just
I'm sorry, before you move on to Japan, can you explain why you had to interview in Philly? I think I've missed that. So can you explain why you had to go to Philly versus interviewing here in New York?
Okay, yeah. So what happened was they basically did like an interview tour in the US, but I had missed the New York date. I was trying to go as soon as I could. And he got as soon as I could. Yes, well, I needed to go. I was like, well, Philly's the next thing coming up. That's like I can get on the train and go there real quick.
Okay.
So that's how that ended up happening.
Okay.
And basically what I found out when I was doing all my research is that Japan does quite a bit of hand holding, right? So in other words, and you don't need experience. I just mentioned that I was, in media beforehand. So I had no experience about teaching English, teaching at all, really. So basically if you have a bachelor's degree, and this is the case in most Asian countries that I know of, if you have a bachelor's degree showing that you were educated here in the United States, and English is your native language, you are able to get work. Okay, so
Okay.
that's basically is the bottom line there. And for Nova, so some of you might be thinking like financially, how could you make these types of moves? Now, Nova, they basically set you up with an apartment already. So as soon as they set you up with someone to meet you at the and let this is the name was the name of the company at that time. I'm sure there are other companies now that do that. But basically, they set you up with an apartment out there. If you needed a loan to get you through until, like your first paycheck there, they provided that as well. They had a greeter at the airport for you. I mean, you were basically, when we talk about hand holding, and this is the case because I know a lot of people who have taught in Korea as well. And this is the case in a lot of, really developed Asian countries where you get these things, you get these, I want to say kind of like perks for being hired and going out there to teach English.
Okay. Listen, I'm with who said it. Listen, give me some sake and some sushi too, and you don't know what I may be willing to do or where I'm willing to move. Yes, I remember. It's so funny when I was interviewing to go to grad school. This was when times were real good. A lot of the schools would come to New York to recruit for business school, and they would host their getting to know you and you getting to know them sessions at like the Yale Club, the Harvard Club. And when I tell you shrimp this big, the best seafood you could think of, the best cocktails. I mean, I met with almost every Ivy League school that came to town. So I get the food angle. But okay, so you decided that Spanish speaking countries were not as accommodating, so to speak, and you wanted to be helped along the way. This is a new area, a new adventure. So you want to make sure that you dotted your I's and crossed your T's, and Japan was the entry into that. Before we get into your experiences, can you just share the most popular types of certifications that are out? Let's talk today because or you could talk about yours. Your TOEFL, TEFL. What is your certification?
I'll start. Okay, I'll start from the beginning to explain about this, right? So again, you don't need a certification at all. You just need a bachelor's degree if you are trying to go to a lot of, the Asian speaking countries. So you don't necessarily need that. Now, if you are trying to look like more legitimate, okay, you want to do that. There are a few different types of certifications that you can get. So what I got was the CELTA. Okay. Which is basically a certificate of English language teaching to adults.
Okay.
And this is by Cambridge in the UK. So, this is if you're getting a certificate to teach in different countries, this is one of the most respected ones, of course, because it has that backing of Cambridge, the UK. They have a very specific methodology in terms of, their teaching method to prepare you to teach. And so, if you really want to do something where you want to look super reputable and you want to be open to admit some of the more lucrative opportunities, then I would go the CELTA route. Now there are, you could, but
can you spell that? Can you spell CELTA?
CELTA. Yes, so Certificate for English Language Teaching to Adults. That's what it stands for. Again, CELTA.
I can
And
that for anyone.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that's what I did. Now, at the time that I got the CELTA, I had already transitioned from working at Essence, and I was teaching at a language school in New York. And I was like, I've been enjoying this teaching thing. Let me get certified, because I still wasn't certified, even though I had been to Japan, I had taught in Japan, still wasn't certified. So, I decided to go with the most reputable in terms of just getting a certificate. It is more pricey than if you're just getting like a TEFL, or if you're just getting a TEFL, it's more pricey than that, but I feel like it's worth it if this is something that you really would like to kind of dive into. Now, let me explain. When I say TEFL, TEFL, right? That's teaching English as a foreign language, right? So what does it mean? You are going into countries and English is a foreign language there. Right. So me going into Japan, into Turkey, into Germany, I'm teaching English. That's a foreign language for them. That's not their native language there. So that's teaching English as a foreign language, TEFL. Right. We have a ton of acronyms in this field. So I'm just going to break down the ones having to do with being certified. Okay. So that one, you could pretty much get it online. They have some hybrid courses as well. I think they do have some, like they have some in-person courses. So it's definitely flexible.